Welcome to Buffalo Game Day Recap. I'm Thad Brown along with AJ Feldman after the Bills get demolished 35-10. And it wasn't really even that close. AJ, I'll let you have a couple things to say here in a minute, but I want to start with this. If you thought the Bills were a Super Bowl team after the first 3 weeks, then you were overreacting and maybe looking for a little social engagement. If you think they're not a Super Bowl team after this loss, I think you're just the same. This is one game. It's not the end of the world. We're going to dive into a lot of the reasons why it's concerning, but as much as people might have looked at the first three and said, wow, look at the Bills, they're the best team in the NFL, and that was not an accurate reflection of a team through 3 weeks, or not someone who was patient enough to say, hey, it's the NFL, we might want to have a little bigger sample size in 3 games, then this is also a 1-game sample size. So from that point of view, let's not go too off the rails. That being said, AJ, go off the rails.
Okay. I will say, I think we did a very good job. I'm very proud of the podcast we did last time of finding the balance between the Bills have looked really, really good and let's not put them in the Super Bowl. That being said, there weren't, the 49ers had looked bad. The Eagles had looked bad. It was the Chiefs who were barely winning games and the Bills doing all their things. That being said, we talked about some, hold your horses here. The schedule was not great up to this point, and they had a bad day today. The teams that the Bills have played so far in weeks 1 through 3 are 1-8 when they're not playing Bills opponents. They haven't really done anything at all. And the problems that we thought going into the season that seemed like they, we kind of figured out a little bit. The coaching, the coordinators, the linebackers, the safeties, the receivers. We're like, okay, you know what? They might be able to piece this thing together, and the rebuild is not a rebuild at all. They were all pretty massively glaring. So those holes are now there. We're into the meat of the schedule. We got, the Texans, we got the Jets, and now they're 3-1, which is, going into the season, probably a fine way to be, but certainly the way they look tonight does not inspire a lot of confidence going forward into this really tough stretch.
No, the big overriding thought I had from this game was the last 2 weeks, the Bills have coached the socks off 2 other NFL coaching staffs, just absolutely embarrassed them. So what happens when your coaches aren't dominating, when your X's and O's aren't ridiculously better than the other team? Well, the answer was they got punched in the mouth tonight. And that speaks to exactly what you're talking about, that there were concerns with the personnel. Now, look, defensively, there were injuries, and there were more injuries tonight. And at some point, those were going to eventually cause a big problem. And I think this Ravens team, with a strong run game and a nice job of using backs out of the backfield and, moving the ball wide and attacking horizontally into the passing game, they had a good game plan and a good group to exploit what the Bills were lacking tonight. Mm-hmm. That said, if Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard in this game, they ain't winning this game either. But on the other side of the ball, the offense is where I want to begin with this discussion, because there were a lot of things that the Bills did well, separate to Joe Brady. We will get into Joe Brady tonight. But the Bills scored 47 points last week, and tonight they scored 10. And it took a Josh Allen bolt of lightning to even get that many points. The number one thing that I thought the Bills were doing well, outside of Josh Allen just being a great quarterback, was they were getting great offensive line play. And now I'm on the field, AJ, so I don't see it as well as everybody else does. But from my point of view, the offensive line looked pretty darn bad. And you cannot have an offensive line with those kind of swings if you're going to be a consistent winner in this league. Now, again, the Ravens do good things, but they didn't come into this game, with some incredible defensive line. Last 2 years, yes. Not this year, not with a new coaching staff. So the most alarming thing to me when we talk about position groups is the way the O-line played, because this will short circuit everything. They don't have the skill people to dominate down the field as we saw tonight. If you don't get what you saw, you don't have to have what you had the first 3 weeks where Josh Allen's like untouched, but you got to get way better than you had tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen sacked 3 times, sacked twice in the 3 weeks before. It certainly didn't look good. Allen was diving and dodging all over the place. It looked like kind of, the Allen of old trying to make magic happen. And it got to the point where even at a spot where, this Bills offense can, kind of, make things happen. They were down, 25 early in the fourth. I mean, it's not going to happen. But, people, the general consensus was, all right, let's get Josh Allen the hell off of this field because it is bad. They're going 25 miles an hour. They eventually, went 3-and-out and put in Mitch Trubisky, but, Allen was not comfortable there. The offensive line did not look good. And like you said, they don't have guys who can just win right off the line of scrimmage. You're not going to get that 2-second out unless if it's, a screenplay or a brilliantly designed play to get a guy open. You're not going to get somebody open just off the go. So they need time to let Allen do his thing, or else he's just going to be, run around like a chicken with his head cut off. Sometimes it works and he finds Khalil Shakir wide open because, a blown coverage in the back end. But a lot of the times it's, what we saw on the sacks where it just kills drives, and there were penalties, bad rushing attack early. It was just, all around a really bad day from the offense.
Without Joe Brady scheming up the X's and O's, without Joe Brady coming up with ways to get guys open, to scheme guys open, the personnel themselves are just not going to get it done. And this goes for everybody. This is Shakir, Kincaid, Keon Coleman, MVS, Mac Hollins. Some of those guys are better at it than others. And Kincaid had some plays and Shakir had some plays tonight. But overall, this team had been succeeding in large part. We talked about it. The coaching was ridiculously good the first 3 weeks. Well, tonight it wasn't ridiculously good. And the result was so bad that I think you are a little bit alarmed. Not a lot. It's one game, like we said, but this is the concern, going forward. And then look, this game was 21-10, middle of the third quarter. And from the moment on the field, I want your take on this too. I want your actually second by second brain continuation of thought, sequence of thought when this happened. I'm on the field and the Bills are down 21-10, moving the ball for a second consecutive possession. And the Ravens are a team that has blown leads the last 2 weeks. And you're thinking, wow, here comes the Bills, doing what the Bills do, which is find a way. And then from the moment I saw number one in the backfield in a Wildcat, I thought this is going to be a mistake. And if it's not a mistake, the only other result is it's going to be a disaster. And I was right on both counts. There are so many different ways to criticize this, but AJ, take me through your reaction to Curtis Samuel taking the Wildcat snap in the third quarter.
So first of all, I was actually consciously thinking about Joe Brady's play calling at that point, because the 3 plays prior, James Cook for 4 yards, James Cook for 6 yards, first down, James Cook for 3 yards. And now we're at, 2nd and 7. And I'm thinking in my head, Brady seems to do this sometimes where he gets something good going with the run game and he does it just one too many times. It turns into, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7. So I'm thinking,
totally agree, by the way. You're totally right about that. There are, and look, this is just how run games go. The general thought is that if you are good on half your run plays, you're great in the NFL. So if you're going to run 4 in a row or 3 in a row, one of them is going to go for 1 or -1 or 0.
Yeah, so I'm thinking in my head consciously, like, all right, you know what? Let's let Josh Allen do his thing. They come on the backfield, Josh Allen out wide, Curtis Samuel in the shotgun, and obviously I'm like, well, what are we doing here? Like, this seems like a bad idea. It turned out to be a bad idea in the moment, and this, I will say, it's kind of preserved in the moment. I put on Twitter, it might be the worst play call ever. Obviously, there are some worse, but it's really tough to think of one that's worse for 2 reasons. A, you have the trick play number 1, just the concept of a trick play. You're moving the ball on offense. You finally have momentum for what it's worth. You score your touchdown. You're driving into Baltimore territory. You know what? This is where we don't get cute. That's the type of play you bust out when you're up, 17 points in, you're up 17 in the third quarter. You're looking for the kill shot. All right. It's Alabama on Saturday. They kind of felt in their bag and they made a trick play late in the second quarter and it came back to kind of cost them. So A, not the time to call a trick play. B, why is this the trick play that we're calling? The whole thing with the trick play, it's misdirection. It's confusing the defense. Well, you've got Curtis Samuel in the backfield. You've got Josh Allen out wide, 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Instantly, Curtis Samuel takes the ball. He runs left towards Josh Allen. Josh Allen runs backwards. What else could they be doing other than giving it back to Josh Allen and letting him throw the ball deep to someone down the field? There was no even instance of a trick play. it did not trick the defenses at all. There was no way it could trick the defense at all. You look at the, the defense, what we can see on the TV copy, because they never showed an all 22. Nobody on defense is freaking out. Kyle Van Noy busts through. Deion Dawkins, maybe has one of the worst reps of his life. He gets by him one way, and then he gets by him the other way, trying to get, Josh Allen again. So the offensive line did nothing. Josh Allen's getting.
Was it Deion Dawkins? I was watching. I thought there was a tight end out there. It was definitely Deion.
There was a tight end on the left who kind of went in. So maybe Deion thought that tight end was supposed to block Kyle Van Noy, but it sure seemed like that was Deion Dawkins' responsibility to block that guy, to do anything to that guy. Because it's not like they were just going to try and let him get past because like a screenplay or anything like that, because he was going to kill Josh Allen, which he basically almost did. And granted, we have not seen an all 22. We haven't seen the dots. So maybe it worked and Keon Coleman was open down the field, but it sure didn't look like him, because with the very scarce replays we got to see what was going on down the field, it sure looked like there was a safety, ready for Keon Coleman to come right at him. So maybe Keon Coleman beat him with, it kind of looked like he was doing a stutter and go. Maybe he beat him on that, but he could have just beat him on a play to begin with. There's no trickeration. So that is my thoughts on what, is up there for one of the worst play calls I've ever seen.
Yeah. And it's not the worst play call ever, but it is a really bad play call on a variety of levels, as you are pointing out. Wrong time in the game. You're not, even if you hit on that play, you're still down 4 points. That isn't like the kill shot. If you were down 4 and that's the go-ahead play, then maybe I'd have more of a thought for it. As you said, the alarm bells were going off from the moment the formation was set that it was a trick play. And to me, the even further poor scheming or planning or strategizing from that is you never showed Curtis Samuel out of the backfield doing something else, to where a team might think, oh, we've seen this on film. We know what they're going to do. And no, look, we're going to do something different. No, this is the only time that anybody has ever seen this. So immediately the alarm bells are going off for something weird. On top of that, it just didn't make sense with what the Bills were doing on offense. Like you said, they were moving the ball. They were moving the ball on the ground. They were just handing the ball to 4, and they were progressing down the field. There was no reason to go away from that. Just run offense. That's why I asked Sean McDermott afterward, when Joe Brady's going to pull something that's deep out of the bag like that, is that a conversation that you have prior? And he says, yeah, we talk about it during the week, but not, within the flow of the game. So, Joe Brady basically has the right, as you would think, that if he wants to, pull out a trick play there, he can. But it was just wrong on every single level, and it short-circuited what was a promising comeback. Now, I'm not going to put the loss on him. You lose by 25 points. There's no one play in the game where you say, oh, if they had done this, they would have won the game. But, that thing was the final nail in the coffin for what had been a terrible performance overall for the offense.
Especially, running the quote-unquote Wildcat Curtis Samuel back there. You've got maybe the perfect Wildcat quarterback in Josh Allen. It doesn't really make sense to have anybody else do other things. And what I think about also is I remember watching a video about the Patriots talking about, it was actually against the Ravens, the Edelman trick play in the playoff game where they do the double pass and it works out for a touchdown. For the longest time, after a long time ago, somebody threw an interception. They were like, okay, we've got Tom Brady. No one else throws the ball but Tom Brady. Well, you've got Josh Allen. Why are you doing all this crazy stuff where Curtis Samuel's in the backfield? You've got Josh Allen. He is a trick play kind of in himself. Just let him do all the weird stuff. And it just didn't make sense. Like you said, they didn't set up for it at all. It was just a trick play that had no trick at all to it. And it failed on about 25 different levels.
All right. I think we've beaten that to death. Not that it was already not dead to begin with, but let's move to the defensive side of the ball. And as well as the Bills have played with the reserves, all the different guys in the Bale Inspectors, Dorian Williams, Cam Lewis's, this kind of, you felt like this was this was coming. And the one thing I will say about the run defense, and I talked about it on Thad's Three Things and a little bit on Buffalo Kickoff Live, is that right at the front of the run D, defensive tackle with Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, the Bills were not getting the same quality of run D from those two players, especially Daquan Jones, that they were used to. Now, I don't think either guy was playing poorly, but especially, again, with Jones, you are used to a very high level of one-on-one play, a guy who's going to occupy 2 blockers, who's not going to get single blocked, and that hasn't been the case through 3 weeks. Miami ran all over them. The Jags did hit plays. The Cardinals hit plays all day in the first half. So this has not been a team with the healthy part of the defense that's been good stopping the run. And then in this game, without breaking it down, I mean, 87-yard runs. I'm pretty sure someone was in the wrong spot there. So it's not hard to figure out that there were issues beyond the defensive line. Can this become a long-term problem? I think that's where, Sean McDermott needs to, do some work. And he kind of, it wasn't a joke, but it feels like a joke where he said afterward, we have a 1 hour plane ride. I wish it was 5. So I'd have enough time to find all the things we did wrong. To me, on defense, it starts with the run D, because this is not just this game. This has been a problem in other games. And it's not just about the injured players. It starts with the healthy guys.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, the injuries do play a big part in it. If you want to, maybe target 3 of the most important players for a team like the Ravens, the Ravens were tailor-made to exploit this problem. Your 2 linebackers and Taron Johnson, who acts as their 3rd linebacker. He's coming back soon, but Cam Lewis has been fine. He ain't no Taron Johnson. He ain't all pro. And, Lewis was exploited. They started, kind of getting out of that a little bit. They started bringing more, a safety into the box. They brought Nicholas Morrow out to play a little bit. None of that really kind of worked. Terrell Bernard, we think is going to come back soon. Taron Johnson, we think is going to come back soon. So they are getting help. They are getting guys back. But it was just a perfect storm of the Ravens had the offense to exploit the Bills' problems, and the Bills, you can only do so much with coaching, and who's saving the coaching was good tonight on the defensive side of the ball. But when you don't got the guys, you just don't got the guys.
Now, and all that is true, but I will say this, and one thing that we talked about also on Buffalo Kickoff Live before the game was that one of the benefits about the way the Bills are constructed roster-wise is that on defense, you lose Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard. Well, the guys behind them are basically the same guys. They are like chock full of smaller, faster, playmakers. I mean, they roll them off the assembly line. And yes, Matt Milano is ridiculously more talented than Balen Spector, but it doesn't mean that if your guys up front are not occupying blockers, that Matt Milano is going to fare a whole lot better. Matt Milano, for as great as he is not a guy that's going to shed an offensive guard if the guard gets a free run to come down on him. Same thing for Terrell Bernard. And again, I'm not going to look at the film to see that for sure, but I know from past weeks that the Bills weren't getting that kind of play up front to allow the Milanos and Bernards of the world to make those plays. Well, I don't want to beat this to death, but there are more things at work here than just the injuries, even though 100% the injuries were a part of it. And you talk about the coaching a little bit too, and I want to say this: the Joe Brady mistake was terrible, and the Bills got out coached tonight. But in a league where coaches spend all week trying to find whatever they think is going to work and whatever cool little clever wrinkle, there are times in games where sometimes a coaching staff just rolls out with something that totally works. Like, you have all the angles covered. You're playing chess, and every time that the Bills move their pawn one way, the Ravens have a move where it's going to like take that piece, and it just happens where sometimes a coaching staff dominates. And I think that was part of tonight as well, where the Ravens had all the answers. And this was something I also talked about, in the Thad's 3 things previewing the game. Before this, the Bills in order played a young coaching staff, a youngish coaching staff, and a coaching staff that might be fired in 2 weeks. This is not those staffs. This is a long time, accomplished, competent, successful, expecting to win staff. This was going to be a different animal, and give John Harbaugh credit. His guys had way better answers than the Bills guys had for this game. Is that a failing by the Bills? Yes. But in the course of 17 games, does that also happen sometimes? Also, yes.
Yeah, and we've seen that in the playoffs before, this Bills team, where they go up against some of the inferior opponents, inferior coaching staff. McDermott looks great. They get to the Andy Reids of the world, and things don't look as good. And I will circle back to your point on the defensive line. Obviously, stats don't tell the full story on defensive linemen. Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones combined for 0 tackles. They did not show up in the box score. So you would think if they were playing well, they would run into Derrick Henry at some point.
Derrick Henry carried the ball, I think, 25 times by himself. Neither of those guys making a tackle. Now, look, if Derrick Henry ran for 10 yards, you're like, okay, they're occupying blockers. When he goes for 2 Bills and they don't have a single tackle, that is a alarming stat, even though, like you said, the box score doesn't tell it all. All right, now, AJ, at a time like this, I like to think of the movie Apollo 13, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
There's a scene early in the movie when the ship is falling apart, all the bad things are happening, and Ed Harris is the flight controller, and he's going around station to station. Everyone's telling him this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. At one point, Ed Harris just kind of rubs his head like the world is collapsing upon him, and he goes to his number two. He's like, "Hey, Cy, is there anything on the ship that's good? Was there anything, AJ, on the Bills ship tonight that was good? I do have a couple things in mind, but I want to at least give you a chance to think about, was there a positive at all that you can take from this game?"
I will start with Keon Coleman, which might sound a little surprising because he had that big drop at the end of the first half. He had a really big drop, really bad mistake. Might have cost, well, definitely probably cost the Bills points. He bounces back with some nice receptions in the second half where, this is why we drafted Keon Coleman. These are the type of plays we made. So the quick turnaround there to, show up and make those plays, I think is a good sign for a rookie wide receiver. Other than that, here, you say your good things first, and then we'll get into some more bad things.
Keon Coleman, I think, is at the top of the list. And I was impressed with the way he used his body on the sideline. You got 2 back shoulder catches where, again, we talked about what Keon Coleman can bring. He can be the type of receiver that even when he's covered, he's open. And those were both plays where even when he was covered, he was open. The drop, was it negative and a little bit concerning? Sure. But hands were not a big issue with him coming in. So until he starts pulling a James Cook where it's every other week, it's a one-time thing that happened in a game where it really didn't make a difference. I'm going to kind of ignore it and kind of give him a pass for that. Beyond that, for me, I got 2 other ones. I like Dalton Kincaid's involvement, and coming off of last week where he was again a little more involved. He had a touchdown, a nice first down catch. He had a couple more plays down the field. The funny thing is the Bills offense is yet to play a game where since week 1, where Josh Allen has to play all 4 quarters. This week was because they got their butts whooped. Last week was they were doing the whooping. I'd like to see Kincaid over the course of a real 60-minute game to see where they can get him to. Because we talked early in this broadcast about how they don't have guys who can win by themselves. Kincaid is one of the better candidates for that. And we've seen promising improvements for him the last 2 weeks. The other one I liked, and this was on the field, so maybe I'm not seeing the full picture. I like Dorian Williams' second half. He was active. He had energy. To me, he seemed like the guy that was kind of leading the spearheading the comeback, I guess is the way I want to say it. And it doesn't mean he was playing the best, but he was kind of the lightning rod that was getting the energy going. And for a team that was, look, they came out flat. They didn't have any energy for good reason. And I'm sure Dorian Williams has plenty of mistakes and was a part of the reason they were down 21-3 in the first place. I like to see a guy that's feeling good enough about the way he's playing to be demonstrative, and to at least be an emotional leader of sorts in a spot where you don't expect him to be that kind of leader.
Yeah, he certainly turned his play around. Obviously, he forced the fumble on Lamar Jackson. He did get absolutely toasted on that Justice Hill touchdown. So
Yes.
there's your
Right.
your bottom, your dark points and when he turns things around. And then I do want to transition to, as I was thinking of, fun people who I can put the good onto. Special teams, Brandon Codrington he muffs a punt, recovers it. And then Tyler Bass. Here comes more Tyler Bass talk again this week.
Yeah, we need to have this conversation. AJ, I think it's probably time to cut ties, frankly, is where I'm going to be. Look, I'm not in the room. I don't know what we feel about him mentally, but he had a camp that was frustrating, and now he's missed. Now, granted, these are kicks that were irrelevant. Well, today's kick wasn't totally irrelevant.
It was relevant, certainly.
Yeah, it was. You're right. So, and it felt like the type of kick he was going to miss. I remember I'm watching him line up for this, and I'm like, this isn't 50 where you got to boom it. This is kind of the long 40-yarder where it's hard, but you should hit it. And this is what he missed last week. There's no relevant sense to that, but it was just a gut feel that this is the kind of kick that Tyler Bass was going to miss. And it's not just that he missed it. He flat yanked it. This wasn't, to me, a bad hold or some sort of condition thing. He just, it's like a driver. You pulled it. It wasn't the swing you wanted. So I'm going to kill the Bills if they hold on to him. He's been a heck of a kicker. I like him. I think he's got a good attitude. But if you're the Bills and you expect to be a part of the Super Bowl conversation, I think we've reached the point where it's become clear that Tyler Bass, I don't know if you could release him, put him back on the practice squad somehow. But it's going to be really hard to keep trotting that guy out and for the rest of the Bills to have confidence that he's going to be a guy that's going to come through when they need him to, because it has been since the start of training camp that he has been a question mark this year.
Yeah, he did make the 50-yard, but like you said, maybe they sign someone to the practice squad and elevate him for, a trial period, I guess, make Bass inactive. But no, I mean, they showed, obviously, on the broadcast, they show Bass after he makes the field goal. I mean, you're obviously not going to be happy when you miss a field goal. Man, I mean, it looked like, his dog just died or something. It looked like he had absolutely no confidence. It almost looked like, if you told me that he was told going into this game, hey, one more screw up and we're having some serious conversations about your future, you wouldn't be surprised, because he looked like a guy that's like, man, I might not be an NFL player on Wednesday. And, the options on the free agent waiver wire aren't great. The guys that they brought in, nobody had a stellar resume, but sometimes you just got to try something new. There are certainly many instances in NFL history where a guy just fails somewhere else. He gets released, he goes somewhere else and does great. There's no explaining it. So who knows, maybe one of the guys that they brought in, a week and a half ago or whatever like that, turns into one of those guys. And the cap hit ain't great. It's not going to help them any much. It's probably going to hurt them in the long term. But, you got to figure out what's going on there.
And I've got to review the cap ramifications. I believe he'd be $1 million or something dead cap. It's not the end of the world. It wouldn't, like you said, be ideal, but I think they can move on from him if they feel like they want to or have to. And that can work for, Tyler Bass too, because whatever is wrong with Bass, I just don't feel like the Bills, or it's going to get fixed in Buffalo. And even for his career, maybe moving on is the better choice. But I had the same feeling as you did watching him react to that kick, as if he had known that it was more than just one miss. Maybe we're both reading into it too much, but bottom line, I don't see how the Bills can keep running him out there. It would take a long time before they would really feel confident with him going forward. All right, let's take a go forward with this ourselves. Kind of the big picture of this game. Like we said, in a lot of ways, it's one bad game. Spencer Brown had a great line in the locker room afterward. He's like, look, if you're playing your best football week 3, then you got a problem, and this is where the Bills can easily look at this game and say, hey, it's week 4. We're supposed to figure some things out. This is going to help us get there. And they're right about that. There's still, many more games going forward. If they beat the Texans and the Jets, this is going to be laughed at. The Bills are going to be 5-1. 2-game lead in the division, maybe 3, and it's going to be full steam ahead for Buffalo. That said, going forward, I think again, a lot of the questions we had about this team preseason cropped up in this game. Do they have the receiver personnel to separate without being schemed up? The answer tonight was no. Do they have the defensive personnel to hang with elite offenses? And again, with who they ran out in the field, the answer was no. If it continues in this direction, then we are concerned with where the Bills can go long term. The key now is you got to show up next week against Houston. You may not win the game, but you at least have to look like you belong on the field, because for large stretches of this game, this was a game where the Bills were not only losing and getting whooped, but being outclassed by a team that they feel like they should be in the same class with.
Yeah, and it's certainly not the greatest stretch to have or maybe it is the perfect stretch to, get socked in the face. But it is obviously a stretch where they play 3 good teams all on the road. It's a lot of travel. And of course, it is Stefon Diggs week. So it's going to be a distracting week, perhaps. Who knows exactly how much that impacts the locker room. But it certainly ain't going to be, going to play the Seahawks, a team that, is just, a complete blank slate, I guess. As for Houston as a team itself, especially if Joe Mixon doesn't come back, on paper, it's an offense that is certainly going to play more into the Bills' strengths than this Ravens team does. They're small, they're on the outside, their skill position, it's a mobile quarterback who the Bills do pretty well with. And the guys are coming back. This is not like last year where, Trey White is torn his Achilles. Matt Milano is, totally done for the year. These guys are coming back. They're going to get some help back eventually. They just got to make sure it doesn't turn into, this 1-game losing streak doesn't turn into a 3. And now we've got some big problems at 3-3.
And you're right about next week too. That Texans offense with a pass-based outside receiver strength team, that's where the Bills not only best players but healthiest players are right now with Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford. By the way, did Von Miller and Greg Rousseau play in the game? I wasn't sure tonight. Were they on the field?
They Von Miller actually did not play a lot. The way you said that, they actually made a point in the broadcast to be like, hey, Von Miller's been playing a lot so far this year. He has not gotten a lot of snaps. So who knows what that was about? Obviously, the matchup doesn't suit well to Von Miller. But let's see. Greg Rousseau, 2 tackles, Von Miller, 0.
So look, I think you're definitely heading down the right path with Von Miller. He's not a guy that they probably want playing the run a ton, and the Ravens were just running it all night.
Yeah.
I will say that the few times that Lamar had to pass, there was not much of a rush. There was a little bit in that stretch in the third quarter where they got some pressure on him. But that's another thing that you talk about what the Bills didn't have tonight. They didn't have pass protection. They didn't have pass pressure either from guys who have been providing it for the first 3 weeks. All right, I'm all tapped out of things to say here. AJ, you got anything more or no?
I'm good.
All right,
I'm good. So let's go. Let's go home.
We will shut it down for this late night, although I have a column to write and a story to do, but whatever. Okay. As always, you can check out Buffalo Game Day Recap at rochesterfirst.com. Click on the 8 Sports Extra tab. You can find us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Next week, a trip to Houston. As AJ so aptly put it, it is Stefon Diggs week. No one is less excited to talk about Stefon Diggs than the players, I'm sorry, let me say this the right way. The media are just as unexcited to talk about Stefon Diggs, as I'm sure the players will be this week, but we will all have to do it because this is what the fans want to hear. You will also want to hear me and AJ talking about the Bills and the Texans at a reasonable time too. AJ, 1:00 game next week. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. You know what the weirdest thing is going to be about next week when the Bills are playing? There's going to be other games happening at the same time. I don't know how people do that. I'm just used to the Bills only being the only game, and there's nothing else happening in the world. But we're going to have to share the spotlight with other football games at 1:00 next week.
For some reason, this Bills-Texans game is at 1:00. So
yeah, that is weird too. Okay, I'm done. For AJ Feldman, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks for watching and listening to Buffalo Game Day Recap.